Hello students, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Ha. So we'll start with the lecture. Sorry for this delay because there are no connections error and there is internet very low in the ethics committee office. Okay. So what we are going to discuss today is what are the ethics consideration in research. How long my lecture is? For how much time? Can you tell?
Approximately 1 hour.
Okay. So
1 hour
it's
approx.
already fair. I have lost half an hour, so I'll try to cover in half an hour. Okay.
You can extend it beyond if you
Okay.
want.
So yeah.
You can take as much as time you want.
Okay, okay. So, as you see the definition of ethics, ethics is somewhat different than the moral code of law or something like that. So, ethics, if you see, is a moral code of conduct defining the right and wrong behavior in civil society, and it comes within. So, there is no any guiding force against it. So, you are an ethical person or you are a unethical person. So it is that clear you should be. So there is no definition for ethics. So it depends on your behavior, your external, whatever integrity which you have followed in the institution and what all faults you are not conducted. So based on that, people will pursue that you are ethical or unethical. So it is different from law because law will regulate you and law actually imposes your external behavior. So because it is mandatory according to law this, so you will change your behavior. You may not be a very ethical person, but when it is made mandatory by law, you will change your behavior. So that is the difference between ethics and whatever regulatory code which has been generated for ethics behavior. So anybody has any doubts in between, you can stop me in between for asking questions. So now evidence-based Medline, if you see, it is an alliance of three things. One is clinical expertise. So even if you are a clinical expert, you can't change people's life. Okay, even you are a renowned surgeon, you can't assure 100% survival. Okay. Second, research evidence is another parlance on which evidence is based. A lot of research is not aimed in improving patients' life. Now, like for example, many of these COVID research are coming because there is nothing for therapy. So everybody is jumping into research. So if you see COVID research now in KEM itself, there are at least 50 research which has been submitted as intervention studies. But I don't know how much of it will be productive. But then research is required. Then patient preference. The patients who are participating actually are not able to judge what is right for them and what is wrong because they are not knowledgeable, nor they are able to find out like where they have to enter, because something which is best effective now may not be effective after some time. Like I'll give you an example of COVID only. Like plasma therapy was thought to be effective 2 months before as per guidelines, but now if you see, it is found to be inefficacious by meta-analysis of many research. So that is how research data keeps on changing day by day. So why we should participate in a clinical research? Now, according to Helsinki guideline, now Helsinki, this is the 18th declaration which was recent. There are many amendments if you see. So the last which happened in Brazil, that is Fortaleza, that is 64th World Medical Association, and that tells you, like so primary purpose of medical research is to generate new knowledge, and this goal can only take precedence over the rights and safety of the participants. But for that, participants have to participate in the study. So basically, to improve the life of people, we have to do research, and for research, we require participants. So it also should be voluntary, or it should be, to enhance science. So what contributes to ethical and valid research? So there are four things which should be relevant. It should be relevant to the times. So now what COVID research is happening is very relevant, because, and many times the research should be locally relevant because the drug should be available in our country. It should be clinically important. It should advance science, and it should be globally transferable. Now what do you mean by globally transferable is whatever research you are doing in India should be accepted in Japan as well. So that is what is called as globally transferable. It should be valid. So your protocol which you have written, it should be internally, there should be internal validity. So whatever objective parameters which you are putting into your protocol, it should be valid, which should be acceptable globally. And then when you are publishing the data, then there should be an external validity. So it undergoes to peer review in many stages, from ethics committee to editors of journals, to when you're sending for grant, there will be people from government agencies who will review your protocol. So there are a lot of validity checks for your protocol before it gets published. Then you should be accountable. So accountable means any research should not be published without ethics committee permission. So you have to submit any protocol, not case reports of course, but then any other protocol other than case report has to go to ethics committee approval. Ethics may say that your study is exempted from review, but you as a investigator have to submit any protocol to ethics committee. Now why you have to submit to ethics committee? Because it protects vulnerable population. It has training to review your protocols, and they monitor also. And it is a transparent system, and there are at least 15 members on the board, which will be a proper peer review of your protocol. And participatory means that there should be a relevant outcome, and that relevant outcome should be shared with the community from which you are partnered, or from which the participants are participating, and the results have to be made available. So it should be CTRI registered and it should be published. Now, these are the modern foundations of clinical research based on these three incidents which happened in research area. First was Nazi experiments, which happened after World War II. There were many captives from many other countries which were taken under Hitler. And what happened after the end of the war? These people did experiments on these captives, and they were not taken consent. So they were all the experiments which were done, like underwater experiment, cold water experiments, or high altitude experiments. Everything, the end point was death. Okay. And because of which, after the World War finished, and when this Nuremberg the court actually ordered that 22 doctors who actually have done these trials, and there were many of them as surgeons. So the Nuremberg court said, they had given some principles that any research should not be done in vulnerable populations. So these are vulnerable, who are under your captive. They don't have any say in that. There is no voluntariness. There is no autonomy. Secondly, they should take consent, and there are many other principles which were given by Nuremberg, which we are following now also. Okay. Second tragedy which happened is 1964, and that happened because, and all these protocol violations, or fraud which happened in research were many times in US, which has some guidelines in place, and because of which Declaration of Helsinki had to be revised many times as per the experiments which were happening at that time phase. The last trial which happened, which was very it had at least went for 1940 to 1970, 30 years. That was Tuskegee syphilis trial. Now this trial was a trial where they actually injected syphilis bacteria in the patients, and they saw the normal course of syphilis. So the patients from primary to secondary, secondary to tertiary, they went into these phases. So what we read in literature is because of these trials which took place in syphilis patients. So Belmont report actually gave their principles after this syphilis study which happened in US, and especially in blacks, and in Alabama County the study happened. So what was Nuremberg Code? So they gave 10 points. One, the person should have a legal capacity. He should be able to express his free choice. There should be no force or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge. So you have to give him what is the background, why you are doing this research. And then there should be an informed consent document which tells what is the nature of the study, what are the possible risks, what are the possible benefits, how you are going to maintain the confidentiality, okay, everything has to be mentioned to the patients. In Declaration of Helsinki, now this was the latest which adopted, it also gave some 12 principles, and you have to read Declaration of Helsinki because it's only a 2-page document. So it gives detailed the narration of whatever I am telling now. So what does Belmont report tells about? So Belmont report actually gave first distinction between practice and research. So when we talk about practice, now practice is what which we routinely do in clinical practice. So here the interventions which are designed are solely to enhance the well-being of an individual patient that has a reasonable expectation of success. So when you OPD, a patient comes to your OPD, you have given a treatment, seeing the profile of the patient, and then you have some reasonable expectation that this will work or not work. But research is not that simple. So your activity is designed to test an hypothesis, and you permit conclusions to be drawn, and thereby you develop a generalizable knowledge. So whatever research comes as a result, that will be used by practitioners around. So this is totally different. You can't say this drug is used in commonly in practice. Why I can't use in research? But for research, you require a background information. Was the drug approved for that condition? Is it an off-label use? If it is an off-label use, you have to go to some other regulator to take permission. So there are steps in research versus in practice there is no steps. So you can use an animal veterinary drug also in human practice. So we had a case about this. One patient in chest TB had aspergillosis, and he had some rare pneumonia, which the microorganisms were not found, which are not known to us as a human microorganism. They were some animal species which are affecting that man. So initially ivermectin was given, but ivermectin was not found to be effective that time. So that was one of the drugs in the line of treatment after giving all the antifungals, which was found to be effective. But then ivermectin was not effective. But then there is an ivermectin one drug which is used in veterinary pneumonias. And then that, there was a dilemma that can this drug be used in practice? Yes, you can use this drug in practice because nobody will sue you, because that is what practitioners do. but this came to a panel in panel like us, like like experts in pharmacology. It came to us, but we said you can't ask us, like if you are asking us and you're thinking in a research area, then we will not allow you because this drug is not allowed in pneumonia. But as a practitioner, if you want to try this, you can try. But they lost time in asking this, and the patient died. So you have to see, understand the situation in practice is totally different versus research. So what Belmont report told us is three principles. One is respect for persons. So you have to give detailed information to the patient, and based on the autonomy of the individuals, patient will volunteer for the research or not. And when the patients,
Ma'am,
yes.
ma'am, could you go a bit slower? Like we are
Okay,
not
okay,
able to understand.
okay. You're not understanding. Okay, so I'll go slow. No problem. So, what do you mean by respect to participants? Okay, now respect to participant is in a research when you are telling details about to some patient, and patient is in a sound mind to understand, okay, what you are talking. So he will voluntarily take the decision after coming to know about the risk and benefit of the research, that he wants to participate in the research or does not want to participate in the research. So where there is compromised autonomy, like patient who is unconscious, patient who is in a state of schizophrenia, okay, in a despair state where he can't take decisions, or patient is pediatric patient below 18 years, there you require special protection because these are the population who are having diminished autonomy. Okay, so you have to take permission of legally acceptable representative. And what is the second principle? Benefit. You have to maximize the benefit and minimize the harm. Like, for example, you are doing an interventional study in patients. You have to tell us this intervention how much will benefit the patient versus how much it will cause adverse drug reaction in the patient. So there should be a balance between the risk and benefit. And it has been seen the benefit should be more than the risk, okay, to the individual patient. So if the individual patient is not benefiting, for example, in phase 1 study, where it is a voluntary study, like human volunteers are used. There are no patients in phase 1, except in cancer patients and HIV drugs we use patients. So here there is no benefit at all. But at large, the community will benefit. For example, the COVID vaccine study, we are going to give to normal volunteers. The normal volunteers will not benefit. We'll take it to say they will not benefit. But at large, the community will benefit if they participate in the study. So that is called as indirect benefit to the community. Third principle is justice. Subjects should be selected fair enough to ensure that the benefit and the burden of medical research are evenly distributed. Now, how we look into this aspect? So, we look into the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So, what is your inclusion criteria? Is it related to the area of research, or simply you have taken some abstract things, more than 18 years? Is that disease very common in that more than 18 years? For example, if you are doing like thalassemia research and you are taking all more than 18 years, you will get very few patients. So you have to understand the science, and then accordingly you have to place your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And ethics committee is there to see, is there inclusion exclusion criteria appropriate to your protocol. So these are the three principles. So can somebody enumerate me these three principles? Yes? Anybody? Shirish?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So
Basically,
what are the three principles?
each it's respect, beneficence, and justice. Like there should uh, there should be respect to the individual who's being recruited, and he should have a sound mind of getting recruited, and he should know what exactly the trial is about and what are his rights in it. And beneficence, there
Yes.
can be direct as well as indirect benefit to the participant. So
Mm-hmm.
indirect benefit is to the society and direct is for him. So depending on the type of study, the benefits differ. Like as you said, for vaccine trials, first phase there would be indirect benefit, but there would be benefit for the community as a whole.
Yeah.
And
And
justice
there is
means
justice.
each participants must have an equal chance of participating in the study, and there should not be any bias of uh, recruiting participants, and the inclusion criteria must be justified.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, sir. So now we'll go ahead. So Bellman principle first is respect. So I'll elaborate how we look into the protocol when you send it to ethics committee. So one is respect. So we treat individuals as autonomous human beings, and we protect persons with diminished autonomy. We have already covered this. A full autonomy means they have capacity to understand and process information. So the people who are schizophrenic or people who are, in absolute depression, you can't take such patients because they are not in the frame of mind to understand. So how we do this? The application to conduct initial and continuing review. So when you are submitting a protocol for initial review, we will look into this, and then we'll see a continual informed consent. And this continual informed consent is important when the studies are for chronic period. Like if you are doing a study for 10 years, so then in between also you have to take consent, because the patient may not be in their frame, he will not remember also what was the research when he participated. So some things may have changed in between. So you have to take continuing informed consent in such type of trials. And here you allow the participant to withdraw from research. Like for example, if the patients with a diminished autonomy, you have taken a LAR permission, and later patient comes out of that schizophrenic frame, and he comes to know that he has been part of a study and his mother has given the permission, he can say, I am not interested. So that is, you are allowing the participant to withdraw from research. The stage when he has the capacity to understand and process the information. Second principle is beneficence. So do not harm and maximize the possible benefit. And if there is no benefit, minimize the possible harm. So how we can minimize? So by doing lot of checks in between. Like for example, in anesthesia, when they do anesthetic procedures and they observe only for 24 hours. So what they say, we will do a baseline reporting of blood pressure, heart rate and respiratory rate, and we will do at the end of 24 hours. So what ethics committee will tell them? Don't do after 24 hours. Take 2 hourly BP, 2 hourly blood heart rate, 2 hourly ECG. If the molecule is toxic, so that is called as minimizing the possible harm. You can't avoid the risk because that drug has gone into the patient. But what I am doing here is I am trying to minimize the possible harm. So if harm is after 2 hours, I can capture that harm and I can treat the patient. So that is what is called as minimizing harm. So ethics committee will give suggestions to how to minimize harm. So this is one of the things which is called as risk benefit analysis, and that has to be done by investigator as well as by ethics committee, and ensure that the research is scientifically valid. If it is the science is not good, then there will be no ethics and the study can be rejected. Third is justice. Subject should be equitably distributed, burdens as well as benefits. You should avoid exploitation of vulnerable population. So vulnerable population is defined in ICMR guidelines. Who fall into vulnerable? So if you see KM hospital, all the patients are vulnerable. They are socially backward, they are economically backward, they are many times, caste wise also backward. So, all these parts fall into vulnerable population. Now vulnerable population is defined as the population who can be, caused to take part in the study because of their social pursuit. So because of something which is lacking in me, somebody can force me to participate in the study. So such populations are only recruited in the study if that disease is affecting that population. I'll give you examples. Tribal population. You can't take tribal population for the sake of taking in study. If you want to do a study in tribal population, the tribal population must be suffering from that disease. Then only you can go, or else they are excluded from doing any studies. There are a lot of special permissions to be taken when you are doing studies in tribal population. So the application, what we check is whether there is a fair subject selection, what is your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and what is the method of recruitment. So from where you are taking the patient, OPD, IPD, going to the community as you do in preventive and social medicine, everything has to be written in the protocol. So what are the twin pillars of protection? So these are done for protecting the rights and welfare of the human participants. So one is independent review that is done by ethics committee, and second is informed consent document. So what are the different guidelines which you have to follow when you are doing research? So when you do ethics committee actually looks into all these guidelines. ICMR guideline now 2017, which is the latest. Indian GCP, which is an old one, but we have to follow, which is a replica of ICH GCP. Drug and Cosmetic Act, which has come in 2019, which is recent, and recent revisions in Schedule 1. Now, what is the expectation of any guideline? Now, for ICMR, the expectation is all the institutions in the country which carry out any form of biomedical research involving human beings should follow these guidelines in letter and spirit to protect safety and well-being of all individuals. So this is what is the minimal expectation of any guideline. So how will you ensure that your research is ethical? So first, you submit to Institutional Ethics Committee for review. So all the proposals on biomedical research involving human subjects must be approved by Ethics Committee. Now what is an Ethics Committee is? It is a committee which is a board of few members which reviews, approves the initiation and conducts your periodic review. Like for example, if it is 4-year study, I will conduct annual checks of your study, how it is going on, how many patients are screened, how many have been recruited, how many have dropped out, okay, how many has adverse drug reaction. Okay, this is all seen by Ethics Committee. So why this Ethics Committee permission is required? Because their aim is to safeguard the dignity, rights, safety and well-being of the research participant. And this body is independent of the institution because the dean can't tell us to approve this study or to reject this study. So that it is independent, even being an institution it is independent, competent because the members are very scholarly selected, consistent in their review because monthly meetings happen and timely. So they will send you a comment letter within 14 days of the meeting. So everything is very much, according to the guideline. So before the study begins, you have to send studies to Ethics Committee. So any design or any molecule you have to submit to Ethics Committee. So maybe it is a prospective study or retrospective, patient studies or volunteer study, modern medicine study or alternative medicine study, drugs, device, biologicals, procedures, radiation, new drugs versus marketed drugs, or any retrospective or website based studies. Everything has to be submitted to Ethics Committee. Now what is the composition of an Ethics Committee? It ranges from 7 to 15 members. So if it is a drug trial, then one basic medical scientist should be pharmacologist. That is preferred. Okay. Where there are no pharmacologists, like for example in periphery, many of the institutions doesn't have pharmacologists. So they have to call pharmacologists for that review. One clinician is required from any branch it is acceptable, one legal expert, one social scientist and one lay person. So this is the quorum. So one of the members are absent, you can't take the meeting. And there is a chairman and member secretary. Or chairman is always independent to the institution. Member secretary is always in-house. So what are the elements of review? Now these are the 7 elements which we will review and I will go one by one. So first thing what I see is scientific design and conduct of the study. Now is the study design appropriate? Now what do you mean by design? Can anybody tell me what is study design? Yes? Mehek, what do you mean by study design? Yes, somebody can answer.
Ma'am, it's how the study will be conducted.
Study
Like
design means what? What is the word study design mean?
the protocol and how they're going to go about the study.
No, study design is prospective, randomized, open labeled or blinded. This is study design. So according to your objective, is the study design appropriate? Okay. Study design is these things. Is it prospective? Is it randomized? It is parallel group? Is it blinded? These are all called as study design. So these are terminologies used for study design. Okay. So what is your objective of the study? What is the sample size calculation? Is it according to your primary objective? What are your conclusions which you are going to draw out of these research participants? Is there a parallel arm? Is there a placebo arm? Like there is a COVID vaccine which has a placebo arm. Is there a justification given for placebo arm? Because or else we will not accept. So all this explanation has to be there in a protocol, because bad science is bad ethics. Now, second thing which we see is risk benefit analysis. So, are the predictable risk balanced against the anticipated benefit? Now, I want to clear you about the people who participate in the study. If you give money for participation, that is not a benefit. That is not considered as benefit. Benefit is, like for example, if I'm taking a COVID vaccine, now in a COVID scenario, and if I'm protected against COVID, that is a benefit. So you have to talk in literally in terms of benefit. And if I'm not protected, that is a risk. Means I will get exposed, I can get COVID virus, isn't it? So that is how you have to balance. And that risk benefit analysis has to be done by the investigator. So what are the different types of harms which we are thinking of? One is physical harm. Like physical harm is you are giving injection, you are taking IV, intravenous fluids or IV blood you are taking for investigation. Psychological harm, when you are doing questionnaire based study, you are asking too many questions, and that can lead to psychological harm. Social harm, for example, if I am a HIV patient and I am recognized as an HIV patient, as such I am not known, but if I stand in the queue of an HIV drug store or somewhere, people will come to know, yes, I'm HIV patient. So that can lead to stigmatization. I can lose my job. Many times partners are not told about the status, so I can lose my partner. So there are many things which I will have that will harm my daily life. Economic harm. I am coming to your OPD, you are making me stand for 4 hours, so I lost my wages on that day. That is the economic harm for me. Legal harm. Like for example, prostitution is not allowed in India, but I come to know from my study that this female is a prostitute, and I inform. Or teen pregnancy is not allowed, but in a gynec study I understand there are 2 patients who are teen pregnant. If I tell the law, if I go to police or tell something, there is legal harm to the patient. So you have to understand when you are going into research, these are the scenarios you can come across, and you are liable to, that time, if it is a HIV patient, the thing is like it is a communicable disease. The harms are more to the community as compared to the patient. So you are liable to tell to the community officer or somebody who is in charge that this patient has been diagnosed of HIV, something like that. So there you are going to reveal something. So patient will have social harm. So these are the things which you should understand when you are doing a risk benefit analysis. So risk benefit analysis is important because these are the criteria for prematurely withdrawing the research participants. Like for example, in between, after 6 months of study, the risk is increasing. Your risk benefit balance has gone towards more of risk. Then they are called as you have to provide with stopping rules. Like for example, the risk is increased by 50% in the participants who have participated, then I will stop the study. So something like that. That is planned before, and that can be your withdrawal criteria or termination of the study. So for us, that knowing that how much risk can be enhanced, because at start everybody knows. The study start we say, no, there is a lot of benefit. But when we start the study, we understand there is nothing as a benefit. I'll give you one example. In a hematology department, there was one study going on, which was a study for leukemia. So they were saying this leukemia doesn't have any treatment. Patients anyways die in 2 years' time. So this drug will prolong their life by 2.5 months, 2.5 years. Okay. So there was a 6-month benefit. So it is acceptable. But the risk was the patient also can die because the drug is not working. So in our site, at our site, there are 12 patients which were supposed to be recruited. In that first initial 6 patients died. Okay. Now this death can be because of leukemia, I'm understanding. So the death can be because of toxicity of drugs, or the death can be because the drug has not worked in this leukemia. So these are 3 conditions which can happen in that patient. So when we did the causality assessment, we found that the patient died because of toxicity. So we told the investigator, please stop the study. There was a lot of problems to stop such a study because they thought they are doing some favor on the patient. They are giving free treatment. They are giving 1.5 lakh injection free to the patient. But patients are dying. There is no benefit to the patient anyways. So what is the fun in giving a drug which is not even protecting the patient at all? So that is what is research. So in research, we pursue that there can be a benefit. But at larger picture, it can harm the patient. So you have to understand it very clearly. And the people who are going to see after this is the ethics committee. So another thing which we provide by finding the risk is we tell them to monitor the study. So one, we tell the investigators to monitor, or we tell the sponsors to monitor, or we ourselves monitor the study. And that is called as data safety monitoring board. So whenever there is data safety monitoring board, they do an interim analysis. Interim means in between analysis. And you find where your research is going. Is it going towards a positive note, or is it going to a negative note? And accordingly you stop. If there is more benefit, then also you have to stop the study. It is called as, or when there is a futility analysis or utility analysis, it is called as. Utility analysis is when there is more benefit. Futility analysis when there is more harms. In both the scenarios, you have to stop the study. So another thing which we look into is the qualification of the principal investigator, and what are the sites where their study is done, so that they can diagnose and take care of the serious adverse events. So qualification, for that we ask for curriculum vitae. So in that curriculum vitae, you have to tell us how many studies you have done, your MBBS tenure, MD tenure, during a lecturership, how many have been published. And so we come to know in the background that what is your training, what level of researcher you are, so that we allow you more studies. The third element which we review is recruitment of research participants. Now, who are these research participants? What is the age? What is the gender? What is the literacy? You can't take all poor patients or illiterate patients. Then I have a lot of my doubts, because these diseases are not prevalent in many of the illiterate patients. Diseases are not like that, isn't it? So you have to provide us with literature saying that this disease is very common in illiterate patients. Then I'll allow you to take illiterate patient. Now, why they take illiterate patient? Because illiterate patient doesn't understand. They will not read the informed consent document. Angutha lagao, they will put the anguthas. So that is not acceptable. Culture from which background is coming. If you are telling me only Hindu patients I want to take, I will ask, is it only affecting Hindu patients? Is it not affecting other races? You have to justify everything which you put into the inclusion criteria. And that is what is your balancing act. That is what is your justice part is here. And how are the participants to be contacted? Is it going to be recruited by word of mouth, or by advertisement, or by letters to doctors? Now, letters to doctors is to private doctors. Like for example, when we do studies in endocrinology for brain tumors or pituitary tumors, it is not very common that all the patients will come to our endocrinopedic. So what they will do a nexus of all endocrinologists in their city, and they will refer the patients to KEM. So that is called as letter to doctors. That also has to be approved by ethics committee. So what wordings here are used, what is the thing you are going to give to the practitioners who are going to provide patients with brain tumors. Everything will be read by ethics committee and allowed. Okay. So now this is how we do a risk-benefit analysis. Physical, economical, psychological and social versus what is the benefit? Physical, relief from the disease. Economic benefit, are you getting some money out of it? Social, indirect benefits, or psychological, like comfort or altruistic reason. Many times, many of them participate for altruistic reason. So in US and UK, people participate because they want the science to go ahead. So that is called as altruistic reason. In India, we participate for money. That is what we found in our study which we have done in the community. So now this is one of the case study. I am showing you this report now. This is adverse drug effect of a clinical trial in anti-HIV agent. Okay. Now this is the data of phase 1. So can this molecule can go for phase 2? Anybody can answer. Huh? You have to tell yes or no. Now can this molecule can go to phase 2 study? Yes?
I guess yes, because the adverse effects are mild. Like diarrhea is a very mild adverse effect, and others are not very prevalent. That is
Why
my
you feel
opinion.
diarrhea is mild? 48% patient had diarrhea, means it is 50% nearby.
But
So it is okay, like
depends on the
470, yeah.
severity of diarrhea. Like HIV is even severe disease than diarrhea. So if it's treating
Okay,
HIV, then diarrhea could be minimized. Like diarrhea
okay.
could be taken care of.
So diarrhea can be because of HIV also, isn't it? It's not because of HIV drug, anti-HIV.
Yeah,
So,
that can
so
also be
yeah,
there.
so that is what you see. So when you see a human volunteer study, now this is a bioequivalence data of a molecule on a healthy human volunteers, and now I'll show you with placebo. So now what you will tell if you see a data like this?
Even if in placebo, it's due to the not due to the
Disease.
drug, not
So that is what I'm saying. So when you see the placebo-controlled arm, you'll find the real data. So many
Yeah.
times the drug data, we feel it is highly risky. So diarrhea, 48% will not allow. So many of the regulators, they take decision accordingly. But we should know the disease profile also as a scientific person. So many people, scientific people are there in this committee because they know HIV, how it presents, what are the problems with HIV per se. So this has not been exaggerated by drugs, but this is a disease condition itself is causing the problem. Okay, and then this drug can go into, so this is called as risk benefit analysis. Okay, I am giving you this simple example because you should understand. So the data is presented in front of you and you have to tell, as I am a pharmacologist, so I have to give the permission, can we take this study to phase 2 by seeing the data. Okay, so that is how we do. Now what is vulnerability? Now vulnerable is diminished autonomy. So how will the informed decision be facilitated? So how they are vulnerable? So if you are uneducated, if you are, your IQ is very less, you are cognitive vulnerable. Okay, patients who are epileptic or patients with dementia and all. Juridic vulnerability, because you are coming in my territory, like a patient of Thana is coming to Parel. So there is some hierarchy of for example, people who are staying in Parel, hum Parel ke hai. So that is that is how you are vulnerable. So from periphery, like a patient coming from Aurangabad may feel vulnerable in Bombay. So that is called as juridic vulnerability. And many times you are being governed by some other authorities who can actually influence your decisions. Medically vulnerable, you are seriously ill, you don't have any option. I am dying, I am a cancer patient, I am going to Tata. I will participate in any study because that 1% chance of hope is there with that drug. I will participate. That is called as therapeutic misconception. So patient feels that the doctor is treating him for cancer, but actually that doctor is researching on that patient because that is a probable patient who will with pancreatic cancer where I can try this treatment. Okay, so to understand that, many times you are not in that position to understand. So that is called as therapeutic misconception. So many times we give you recommendations like the PI should not be the same person who is sitting in the OPD because he can influence decisions. So there should be a second resident who should ask the patient to participate so that patient is not influenced. Like for example, like in cardiology department, if caregiver sits in the OPD and tells you participate in the study, all the patients will participate. अरे साहब ने बोला है, बड़े साहब ने बोला है. So that is how they get influenced, and that is called as therapeutic misconception. So if he is a junior resident sits there, nobody knows that junior resident. So they will participate or not participate depending on their understanding. Okay? Differential vulnerability. Now in front of husband, wives will not open their mouth and they will participate. Or in front of mother-in-laws, daughter-in-laws will not open their mouth. Or in front of mother, children will not open. That is called differential vulnerability. Because there is some hierarchy and you are respecting that hierarchy and you can't take decision. Then your decision making is compromised. Allocational vulnerability. You are poor and I am telling you I will give you 1,000 rupees. So there is an undue inducement, or in pediatric patient you are giving toys. So that is called as undue inducement, and that is again vulnerable. Socially vulnerable, by caste, by tribe, by being illiterate, or you are being sex worker. So EC has to protect them from discrimination, stigmatization, and social victimization. Like for example, I am HIV and I am a prostitute, sexual sex worker. So that is more harmful for me because my entire business can get ruined if somebody comes to know that I am HIV. No customer will come to me. That is how it is. That is called as social victimization or stigmatization in the
Ma'am?
profession which is already compromised. Yes, you want to ask something, Anish?
Yeah, ma'am, regarding economic vulnerability, so allowing financial compensation isn't wrong in itself, right? I mean, if I wanted to encourage patients to participate, I would provide them some kind of financial compensation. So would that be considered as unethical?
No, it is, but it should not be an undue inducement. For example, you are doing a questionnaire with 20 questions and if you want to pay patients 200 rupees, acceptable. But if you are paying 500 rupees, then it is undue inducement. They will not read the questionnaire. They will simply participate for that money. So that decision again will be taken by ethics committee. How much you should pay for participation. So paying for participation is not unethical. But the amount how much you are paying, that is very important. Because the amount is paid for travel, amount is paid for food, amount is paid for inconvenience, amount is paid for loss of wages. So there are different categories. Amount is paid for blood collection. How many times? Like I do a pharmacokinetic study. I prick for 14 times. I will give you 5,000 rupees because I'm pricking you so many times. So it is depends on the type of harms I am going to put in the patients. Payment is not at all unethical. Other than payment is being told to be given because you are actually taking a lot of time of the patient. Now, the fourth thing which we review is suitability of PI, including experience, training, and facilities. So we ask for your GCP certificate, we ask for your curriculum vitae. Many times we ask for training certificates also. For example, if you want to do a laparoscopy study, we will ask you, are you laparoscopically trained? How many, which workshop you have done? Because now for example, I have given you laparoscopy example because there are no certified laparoscopy training this thing also. So many of the surgeons, they will offshoot go to some place, do the 2-day training and they will say like I am laparoscopically trained. But actually they are not laparoscopically trained and they want to do a research on that. So this is very much in a dilemma situation. Many times decisions are taken like that and they can't produce certificates also because many of the associations, they don't provide certificates also. They will say this fellow has attended this conference on laparoscopy training, but that is not enough for doing a laparoscopic surgical research. Okay. And what is undue inducement, that also is seen. And are there any post-trial access? Like for example, if a drug is not marketed in India, like for example, I'll tell you now this COVID, now the drug is not marketed, for example, remdesivir, and now the studies are ongoing. And if we find that some group is getting benefited by remdesivir, so we will ask them, is this drug can be made post-trial access? Now post-trial access is never there for any anti-infective because infection is gone, patient is out of the study. But in chronic condition like osteoporosis, now we had one study of osteoporosis, the drug was denosumab. So the denosumab was not a standard of care in our endocrine department. They used to give all alendronate or bisphosphonates to all the patients. Now you are putting the patient on denosumab. And if the patient is getting benefit out of denosumab, which is not marketed in India at that time point, we said you should provide the drug to the patient in a concessional rate or you should provide the drug free of cost for at least for next 2 years till the drug is marketed. Because patient can't go back to original bisphosphonates because he has been tried with denosumab and he has been beneficial. He's going to the osteoblastic phase. You can't stop the drug because the study is over and put him on the original drug which was maybe not working in that patient because he has been taken in this drug. So you have to understand a lot of things. When ethics committee takes decision, this has to be a priori to EC permission. Because later if I tell this clause, sponsor will not agree for this. So at start of the permission only we should ask for such clauses and many times sponsors they accept. Next is care and protection of research participants. So will the patient have to bear the cost? Like for example, when patient is coming, are you going to give travel compensation? For example, if a patient dies in the research, is there any insurance coverage to the fellow nominees? So everything has to be there in your protocol in interventional sponsor studies. How is the confidentiality and security of personal data is being done? So where you are keeping the archiving the data, is it lock and key, or if you are keeping in the computers, is it password protected? Everything will be asked by EC. And in community, will the data go back to the community? That is what we are asking, impact and relevance of community. The next is informed consent document. So how the informed consent is going to be taken? Is it the informed consent adequate, complete, understandable? Where you are going to take an LAR permission, legal acceptable representative? If the legal acceptable representative and participant is illiterate, are you going to take an impartial witness? Who will be your impartial witness? The impartial witness should be a person who should be independent to the study. So he can't be a nurse of that ward, okay? Because the nurse will be influenced by the doctor who is working in that ward. So he can be a relative of other patient, but he can't be a nurse of that ward, assent in pediatric patients. So based on the principle that competent individuals are entitled to choose freely whether to participate in research or not, and we protect the individual's freedom of choice and respect the individual's autonomy, and this protects the subject's rights. So informed consent should always be written, voluntary, from every subject. You can't take mass informed consent before the study related procedure and documented on EC approved form. The version which is approved by this committee, the same informed consent signature you have to take. So it has two forms. One is participant information sheet and second is informed consent. So both together is called as informed consent document. Okay. So how should the consent be documented? Participant or participants legally acceptable representative you have to take. If both participant and legally acceptable representative are illiterate, then impartial witness has to be taken with thumb impression of the subject or LAR. Okay. So where we can give a consent waiver. So where the research involves not more than minimal risk, when the participant and the researcher do not come under direct contact. So you are doing a retrospective analysis. So you have all the data in your medicine OPD. Like many of this data is coming from medicine OPD, if you want to do retrospective analysis of this data of COVID, of this patient data, what is the outcome. So there is no contact. Your ID of the patient will be kept confidential. So that becomes a retrospective data analysis. No contact with the patient at all. In an emergency situation like COVID, okay, but you have to write a clause in the protocol that the patient's data or patient data will be maintained, the data confidentiality will be maintained at, that has to be written in the protocol. So privacy and confidentiality of data has to be maintained. Okay.
Ma'am,
So
so
these are
for
the studies. Yes, yes.
online studies, then can we request waiver of consent? So
Which
in
one?
there is
Which one?
for online questionnaire based studies where there is no interaction between the investigator and the participant.
For questionnaire based study, you have interaction. You are asking questions na, to the patients.
Yeah, but online studies like where we circulate the questionnaires, so
There
there
also you have
is
to take a consent. But there will be
consent is
short consent. It is called a short consent.
okay.
Yeah, in questionnaire based study you require consent because there you are asking questions, and that questions can be many times of the system, of the institution, of the disease, and there you are coming to some analysis. Okay, and there is contact, isn't it? Contact is not physical contact. You should not have
Yes, yes,
interaction
yes.
only with the participant. There
Right,
should
right,
be
right.
absolutely no interaction. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are the examples. I give one example is anonymized biological samples. Like pathology samples are lying down in pathology labs. They want to reinvestigate. Or data repositories. Or leftover samples in microbiology. Or research on publicly available information. Like you have a database of all warning letters which have been sent by DCGI to the investigators. You do an analysis. So that is becomes totally online data analysis. Or studies on disease burden, incidence or prevalence. Exempt from review is another thing which we ethics committee does this, and in 14 days you get an exempt from review. So the review is done by only 2 people in the ethics committee. Audits of educational practices, research on microbes in cultured in the lab, or research on cadavers or death certificates which is done by forensic medicine or anatomy department. Research on immortalized cell lines or analysis of data freely available in public domain. So all these can be exempted from review. So now there are some recent regulatory notification which I will rush across. One is EC registration. Your EC has to be registered. All academic studies has to be registered. Serious adverse events, there are timelines which are given, and for AV consent is another guideline. So registered EC till 7. Now this was old data. Now if you see, there are a lot of re-registered ethics committee. So the data is 1200 present data. And this is found in CEDESCO site. Okay, so if you see, Maharashtra is leading in ethics committee registration, followed by Gujarat and all south countries. But if you see, the north is actually lagging behind. Uttar Pradesh is such a big country, but there are only 30 ethics committee which have been registered. So there is an issue there. So these are the CIRCUR recognized ethics committee. So internationally accredited ethics committee. So there are very few. If you see, only there are 8 ethics committee. In that, KM and Tata were the first, and rest all have followed the suit. And there are AHARP accredited ethics committee. Now these are very again less. These are all private hospitals like Apollo, Jahangir, Kasturba Hospital, Manipal, or Bangalore Hospital, or Sayadri Hospital. So all are accredited. So 20 private have got recognition and 1 government, NABH accreditation. So now this is a new guideline which you can take an advantage of. Academic trials, if you are doing a study in an off-label indication, that becomes a new drug. Okay, for example, chloroquine, now hydroxychloroquine is used in COVID patients, which is off-label use of hydroxychloroquine. So that becomes a new drug for that indication. So the permission should be given by ethics committee. So there is no other permissions required. So new drug trials also can be done by ethics committee permission. So this is the guideline. Okay. No permission required from DCGI. Okay. AV consenting is another thing which you should know. In a clinical trial, new chemical entity and in vulnerable population, you have to do video consenting. So you have to make the patient sit and the video will be on and you have to take the consent. And audio consenting is taken in patients with HIV and leprosy patient because these are the diseases which are stigmatized at present times also. So you have to do a audio consenting. And this is the timelines for SAE submission. So initial, if there is a serious adverse event, then you have to submit to ethics committee within 24 hours, first report. Then follow-up report should come in 14 days by the investigator. Then in ethics committee will send that report in 30 days to DCGI. Okay. And the regulator in 150 days sends to sponsor saying that the SAE is related and you have to pay this much amount as compensation. And a sponsor has to pay the compensation in 30 days. So this is what we do basically in research before, during and after completion. So before completion of the study, we give an application form with required documents. I will show how the procedure for EC submission you should do. I will show by the help of software. Can I show that?
Yes, surely, ma'am.
Yeah. And during the study, you have to, what you have to submit is amendments, interim reports, that is whatever, if the 3 monthly interim report is there, you have to submit that, annual updates, protocol deviations. If you have written something in the protocol, you are doing something else, you have to submit this as deviations, serious adverse events. And after completion, you have to give completion report, post-trial management report and record keeping. So this is what this is that. So adverse event all I will not cover because of time up. So I will show you the software now. Okay. Manali, the software ला कोना खींचा दो website इथे बस. So 1 minute I will show you how you should access the software and then we will show you how to go about with the software. Stop. So any doubts you can ask till then, till the activity of software. Yes students, any doubts?
तो वो waiver का ही
What you want to ask? Waiver?
Currently the IEC manager has made a waiver of the document as a compulsory document. So even if you are not
Waiver?
taking waiver, like in the IEC manager while submitting, it's coming in red, like it is a compulsory document. So
Yeah,
even
but
if you
then
are
what you have
not,
to do is you have to write the document, you have to take a page, you have to write not applicable
and blank
and you have to
document
upload.
can be submitted.
Blank document you should upload.
वही किया है.
So that is what you have to do. So these are small nuances. So that I'll show you how you should go about. So the website you can see now.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the State GS Medical College website. IEC manager you have to type in your URL site, and then when you open it, then the State GS Medical College comes. There are many other, there are at least 30 institutions which are taking using this software. So you put your email ID and your ID, which is approved by this committee. Yeah? So if you are not a PI, COI can't enter. PI only can enter through this software, and you have to put it as principal investigator. Okay. Now the IC admin is accessing, so she has put as IC admin. Then you log in. Okay. So if you don't put your credentials right, it will give as credential do not match. So you put as your principal investigator. So it comes as all this section will come. Your unapproved projects, ongoing projects, your status of your ongoing projects, how many are completed, how many are discontinued, how many have got query letters. So then you go to this one. Okay, go back na. So I will submit through my this thing. I'll show you how we do about it. Okay, can you see? So all your projects are coming here. So these are the submission with IC review 13, and then ongoing projects 3. So 10 have been completed, and this query letter you received, letter of permission received, everything you can download from this site. So I go to now if I want to submit a new project, so there is two sections here, dashboard and submit new project. So I go to submit new project, okay, and then you have to select the type of project. So it is investigator initiated, government, pharma, thesis. Accordingly, you have to put. Don't make mistakes here. Okay. Then you have to put the full title and then you put the PI name. So automatically PI name comes, and the review type that also you can put. So do you want exempt from review, expedited review, or full board? So you write a letter to secretary saying that you want exempt from review, but you can select these things also. Okay. And then put the title again, short title, and then the sponsor. If there is no sponsor, you have to write self-sponsored. Okay. Save this page, go ahead. Okay. And then you submit each documents. Now here there are a lot of documents. So you have to go with the documents and you have to upload. So there are at least the document कसं येतं का? डॉक्युमेंट दाखवायचं असेल तर काहीच केलं नाही. शो वन एक्झाम्पल. So there are document types is all the initial your permissionary documents are there, like letter to member secretary, then protocol summary, that is compulsory, protocol, informed consent document, then the translations, then case record form. So if you see this application form of clinical trial, so accordingly you have to put an application form. So if it is an academic trial, the application form is different. So you have to put that. If it is a clinical trial with sponsored or government study, this is the application. And then annexures, all the annexures, whichever relevant annexures are there, you have to give that annexures, case record form, then current studies, ongoing status of current study of PI, that has to be there, GCP certificate, everything you have to merge. So if there are 10 investigators in your study, like your students research always has 10 investigators. So everybody's GCP you merge, everybody's CV you merge, everybody's MMC you merge. Okay? And then informed consent English, translations, protocol, summary, a valid MMC registration, all these documents you have to submit. And later you go down, you save, go to next and submit to ethics committee. Clear? Any doubts?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So simple it is. So at home also you can sit, but all the documents should be kept first, converted into PDF, and then only you can upload. You can't upload in Word file. Okay?
Ma'am, regarding the login ID and password, so will that be provided where to create our own login ID and password?
No, but you can't become PI, na? So your PI already has a login. So you have to take his login and enter the system.
Okay, ma'am.
You will not be given login because you are not permanent employee of KEM. Logins are only given to permanent employees of KEM, and so they can become PI. So any department you choose, PI ka email ID and password you have to put before you access the software. So you can't access because you will not have access because you are not given an email ID and password. Okay?
Okay. Ma'am, could you, like, as a reviewer from ethics committee, could you just let us know, like, what are the common mistakes that UG and PG students do while submitting a protocol? Like, what are the common ethical mistakes in the protocol so that we can avoid it?
So one common mistakes which we found is they don't tell from where they are recruiting the patients. Okay, recruitment strategy they never mention. Okay, inclusion exclusion criteria is very weak. They don't write only, they write more than 18 years, and in exclusion they write less than 18 years. Informed consent will be patient who are voluntary consenting, patient who are not voluntary consenting. ऐसा exclusion वैसा नहीं होता है. When you're putting something in inclusion, that should not come repeat in exclusion again. Clear? In exclusion, it should be very important things which should be excluded. These are all comorbidities will be excluded. Okay? When you're saying that patient who is consenting will be included, that automatically means patient who is not consenting will not be included, isn't it? So when you're saying more than 18 years will be included, you can't write less than 18 years are excluded. That we understand, no? So another thing, questionnaire validation is not done. So what you do is validation is you give the signature page of all 5 people who have validated your questionnaire. That is not acceptable. So what you have to do is you have to do a content validative ratio, you have to do a reliability check with Cronbach analysis. So that all has to be given in your methodology, what you have done for your validation of your questionnaire. So that has to be given upfront by the data, or else ethics committee will ask you such questions. And if there are multiple departments, then you have to take permissions of that multiple departments. Permission letters have to be attached. So many times what you do, you take dean permission, and then there are 10 departments in which you are doing research. So you have to take all HOD permissions, because later there are some people who are sitting in the board, and they will say like, "Arey, our department this research is going on, but we don't know." So such objections they then creep in. And ethics
Okay.
section is written very badly by students. So ethics section, what we are expecting is you have to write there, study will not be started without ethics committee permission. Any amendment or any protocol deviation SAE will be conveniently reported. Annual reports will be given to the patient. If the inclusion exclusion criteria changes, then we will update the ethics committee. Something like that you have to write in ethics section. So that generally you write Helsinki declaration will be followed, current guidelines of ICMR will be followed. That is guidelines. But in ethics section you have to write specific to your protocol. What can happen to your protocol or what happens. And completion report is not given. Annual reports are not given by students. You start your project in first year, the second year you lose interest or you are lost only. You don't know only what is happening. And you are expecting somebody else to do that. So there should be delegation. So in your log of delegation also you should delegate such people, such things where somebody only has to communicate to ethics committee. So timely he should submit the protocol, timely he should give annual report, and timely he should submit completion report. And he should look after publication also. So when you are trying to do a teams in research, you should actually make teams accordingly. So you delegate responsibility to one person who is actually a good person, who is a good organizer or who is a good leader and does work timely. Or else reminders will go to PI. PI doesn't know where the student is there, because I am first year, if I am, for example, I am second year teacher. When you go to third year, I am lost contact with you. So I can't contact you. Many times that is how it is, and the projects are lying and the warnings are coming to the investigator again and again. That I know report has not come or your final report has not come. You understand what I am saying?
Yes, ma'am.
And choose principal investigator
Got it.
also who are very alert, who are timely. Or you are sending a mail and the PI is responding after 2 weeks. Such PIs will not do a good job for you also. They will not review your protocol. They will not give you proper analysis and results. They will not write discussion for you. And such studies will not be published also. So end of the day, what I have seen in KEM is the students are very enthused when they enter second year. And they do research, but half the research are not published. So you can do a study also on that. How many studies have been done till now by students and how many have been published? So that is a worth asking question, because hardly people are publishing. They are only doing study for presentation. So they get an award in many of the presentations in second year, third, some forums, and they lose interest and then they are lost. Then they start with internship chalu hai, third year ka exam hai, second year ka exam hai. So that doesn't happen. Na? In research, everything is ongoing.
Yes, ma'am. So if anyone else has any queries regarding the submission, they can ask, ma'am.
So okay,
I guess no
how
one
many are
has.
attending this session? At least
25.
25. Okay. So are all 25 people doing research?
No, currently I am doing. I
Shirish,
submitted
you
the
are
protocol
Shirish Rao,
yesterday.
na? You are Shirish?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So you are the only one person doing research?
No, no. Like many are interested, and some of them may have started also. Some of them are figuring out the ways how they can start. It was a
Okay.
session how to empower people how can they go about the doing research and like what are the considerations they
Okay.
must have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want anything else to be added? Shirish, you can tell because you have experience of research. So
As such, the main thing that was to be covered has been like how to go about submitting the things and what are the common mistakes that people do while submitting and
yeah, yeah. So
the
that is
things
what I
that
said.
people
These
need
are
to
the
know
common
while
mistakes.
submitting.
Yeah. So these are the common mistakes, and and because the protocol is not seen by PI, so many times that error
Right.
occurs. So what I am telling you is the inceptionally you have to take people who are good researchers, but good researchers will be always busy. That I'll tell you. They will not take you as students because they already have a lot of projects in their hand, and but they are the people who will look into the protocol very diligently, and the mistakes will be minimal in such people's protocol. But always what happens, people will not review. You have written as per your as per your understanding. So there are a lot of flaws in the
Yes.
protocol many times.
Right.
So initially some scrutiny, or you can go for peer review also. So it's not always the
Yes.
PI has to review. So you can go across. You are knowing some teachers, show them, and take
Yeah.
their inputs. So they will also give good inputs many times, even if they are not co-investigators.
Right.
But
Right.
what I remember in research is whoever's consent you are taking for your project help, you should acknowledge at the end of the day. So in acknowledgement section now you can acknowledge 10 people also. There's no any limitation for acknowledgement. You can
Right,
acknowledge
right.
n number of people who have helped you in protocol. So that we
Right.
actually forget at the end of the day.
So that has
We
to
end
be
up only
mentioned
writing our
while publication.
while publication I
During,
am saying. While
yeah,
publication
yeah,
you should
yeah.
acknowledge saying that this was a contribution and this helped in enhancing this protocol, so acknowledge so and so person, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
These are all ethics. That is what I'm saying. Ethics,
Yeah,
there is
yeah.
nothing as defined.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.